يا هلا 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 حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا حن قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا هلا يا
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the program. It's another Wednesday morning and that means you're in my company till 10 o'clock this morning. Very interesting discussions lined up. As always, we'll be talking to Muniba Bayat about olive harvesting and hiking in the Palestine. Anjali Clinics will be in to talk about this amazing concept, container clinics in the townships offering primary health care. But first up, we're going to talk about stuttering and cluttering with speech therapist Dina Lillian. She's here to talk about her area of speciality, and that really is stuttering. Dina, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you here, and I should imagine this is an important discussion to be having. I remember growing up as a child that I had a cousin who used to stutter. And way back then, I used to think she's doing it to get attention. Mm-hmm. Because now she's a grown-up, she doesn't stutter, or once we reached our teenage years, the stutter disappeared completely. What is stuttering? What is cluttering? And do children, in fact, do this to get attention?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, because stuttering is very enigmatic and people really don't know much about stuttering. So just to address the first question or your comment, people who stutter generally do not stutter to get attention. 1% of the population stutters across all nationalities, all cultures. The majority of people who stutter are male or female. What do you think?
Female?
Male.
Oh, goodness me.
Yes. So one in every 4 is a female. So the majority of people who stutter are men.
Do we know why? That men are, more, you get stuttering more in men than women?
I think it has to do because of the genes, the XX and the XY genes,
okay.
Though I'm not exactly sure of the details. It's like boys also have more syndromes than females.
I wasn't aware of that either.
Yes. So we do know that, as I said, so there are more men who stutter than female, but stuttering has been around for ages. In the Old Testament, you know who stuttered?
Moses.
And throughout the ages, famous people, Winston Churchill, Marilyn Monroe, Bruce Willis, Tiger Woods, James Earl Jones, Ed Sheeran, King George.
Okay, so, I remember the King's speech.
Yes, absolutely.
And he had to do a lot of work before he actually delivered that speech to try and overcome, obviously, the stuttering. But be that as it may, when we talk stuttering, you also mentioned something called cluttering. And also you're saying to me that, 1 in 4 females only, as opposed to men. So stuttering is more prevalent in men. And I guess when you have a boy child that stutters, you can do an intervention and get the necessary help. But what about if there's never been an intervention, you're a young adult now? Are men then prone to having the condition seen too?
Well, and it actually goes back to the question you initially asked, which I didn't actually get to answer, which is every child goes through a period of normal disfluency. Between the ages of 2 to 5, 85% of children outgrow it. Some of them don't, and they may become people who stutter. The question is, and I have parents who phone me and they say, Dina, I'm concerned my child is stuttering or has disfluency. Shall I bring him in? What's the process? So if there is a concern, I always get the parents in. But saying that, between 2 to 5 years old, every child has normal disfluency because this is the time that they develop language and vocab. So there is normal disfluency there. But we also look at risk factors and what causes stuttering. Research, as I said before, stuttering's been around for ages, and research has been around for ages. Research says, quote unquote, what causes stuttering? Stuttering is a complex interplay of a number of different factors, which means, what does that mean? We actually don't know, okay? Sounds really beautiful.
Okay.
But factors that contribute towards stuttering is genetics. Okay, 65% of people who stutter, there is stuttering in the family. However, that does not mean if a person stutters, your child will stutter. It does not mean if there's no stuttering, your child won't stutter. It just means it may be a higher risk factor. Just the same as if the child is a boy, it doesn't mean he's going to stutter because he's a male. It just means there's a high risk factor and it's kind of a red flag. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. The other thing, and I know you're not a psychologist, you're a speech therapist with a special interest or speciality in stuttering. But would this create other problems in terms of self-esteem as they're growing up because they stutter and obviously have an impact on their lives going forward?
Absolutely. And this is really imperative because when you have a 3 or 4-year-old and there is a disfluency, it is just a behavior. So it may be, there are different kinds of stuttering. So there may be a repetition where it's like that. It may be a block where someone just can't get anything out. It may be a tense prolongation where it's like that, okay? Initially, it's just a behavior. But if people react negatively to that disfluency or that stutter, and that child starts developing cognitively, there becomes usually a psychological component. And then it's very important for the speech therapist, even though we're speech therapists, we deal with the speech, it's important for us to deal with the psychological component. Obviously, if it goes beyond our realm of expertise, we will refer to a psychologist. But if that anxiety, and it usually has to do with the stuttering, we as speech therapists, it's important to deal with that as well. In an adult and adolescence, stuttering is compared to an iceberg. What do you see when you see an iceberg? You just see the
Top, obviously.
Absolutely, the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is compared to the overt stutter, which is what a person hears, maybe the repetitions, the blocks. That's only the tip. But there is so much more to stuttering that one doesn't know in an adolescent and an adult. There's an embarrassment, there's an anxiety, there's a frustration, there's avoidances. You know, some people who stutter will go into a restaurant and because they feel they may stutter on the word hot dog, they'll order a hamburger.
Oh.
Okay? So it'll change everything about them. They may avoid speaking situations, avoid interviews, become sick on a day of an oral in school. Okay, so it really it can impact on the person holistically. And that's why it's important to understand, and people understand, that stuttering is not just about the speech, and to have patience with the person who stutters, to deal with them like an individual. There's nothing wrong with a person who stutters other than the words don't come out. It's not that they don't know what they want to say. It's different from a stroke, because with a stroke, sometimes a person has a word-finding problem, okay? People who stutter don't have a word-finding problem. They know this is a couch. They know your name. They know my name. They know their name. Okay, but it just doesn't come out. So it's very frustrating, and it's important that people who interact with people who stutter maintain eye contact, wait, listen, be an important part of that conversation.
And don't complete their sentences
Absolutely.
for them.
Don't complete their sentences, don't fill in words, unless obviously the person who stutters asks them to. Don't speak over them. Also, I mean, if a child, and this happens a lot as well, obviously siblings, a sibling rivalry, kids tend to speak over each other. So if there's a child who stutters, say she's a sibling and has got 3 or 4 kids at the family table, every child gets a turn for speaking. And make sure that sibling A doesn't speak over sibling B, doesn't speak over sibling C. It doesn't mean everyone must give special attention to the child who stutters, but it's important that everyone gets the child to speak. So if that child who's stuttering, everyone waits, let them finish, then the other child speaks. So it's really important, and those are what we call some of the indirect strategies, which are important to put in place to prevent the stuttering from becoming more, to prevent the psychological developments, the psychological aspects of developing, etc.
What about when a stutterer finds him or herself in a stressful situation? What happens, what goes through their mind, and obviously they're going to really, really battle to communicate or interact.
Yes, and this is a really important question as well, so thanks for bringing it up, because people think that stuttering is caused by anxiety. And my question to you is, does everyone stutter in this world?
You've just said just 1%.
Yeah, there's disfluency, but not everyone stutters, but everyone gets anxious, right? So there's no way that anxiety can cause stuttering, but anxiety definitely exacerbates stuttering.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if someone is stressed, if someone is anxious, if someone perhaps is even sick, okay, so some people may say there's a correlation even between their inner health and their disfluency, then what happens? The person stutters more. We know about stuttering that it is, and I'll have parents come to me, and even people who come, I don't understand, sometimes I'm more fluent, sometimes I'm less fluent. And there are sometimes triggers, there's environmental impacts as well. So if dad goes overseas, okay, that may impact. If you're having a very stressful day, if your boss isn't happy with you, of course that has an impact on the disfluency. So anxiety, stress exacerbates it, but it doesn't cause it.
Okay, let's go for an ad break. When we come back, we're going to find out why your interest in being a speech therapist with a speciality in stuttering. We're also going to unpack what is cluttering and a whole host more. Dina is my guest, Dina Lillian. She is a speech therapist with a speciality in stuttering, and that's exactly what we're talking about this morning. We do hope you find this useful. If you have a loved one suffering from this condition, then please stay tuned very closely. Dina will also give out her web address and other contact details a little later on in the show. Welcome back. We're talking stuttering, and we'll get to cluttering in a minute or two. Dina Lillian is a speech therapist with obviously a special interest in stuttering. Let's find out why, and also ask her about Speak Easy, which is a support group, and a whole host more. Dina, why are you so interested, and why have you chosen stuttering as a speciality?
The reason was actually because I stuttered quite badly as a child.
Badly?
Yeah. Quite severely, let's put it that way. So I went for therapy, and it's really important also to know that one is never too old for therapy. One is never, early intervention is great, but one is never too old to go for therapy. I've had people who come to me who are 50, 60 years old. There is no known cure for stuttering, but there's definitely ways to manage it. And when you go for therapy, depending on the therapist, one will be taught different techniques to help manage it.
So when people come in for therapy, whether it's kids or older people, are there special exercises, a homework type of stuff that they've got to go back home and practice? Or is it just techniques that you give them to be conscious of all the time?
Therapy is a very, as you can imagine, in-depth and involved process. And it takes time. Unfortunately, there is no known pill or operation that one does. So it's a process that occurs over a couple of months. To get techniques, maybe years, depending on the individual, depending on the therapist. And what usually happens, or the way I give therapy, is that a person comes weekly for therapy, and then, yes, they do get homework to do, and then they come back, and then we work with what they've done that week. So in terms of therapy, and we were talking about this earlier, I believe that in order to get the optimal result in therapy, it's important that you have a motivated client, so the client or patient wants to be there. The speech therapist knows what he or she is doing in terms of fluency, and there's a good rapport between the therapist and the clinician, the therapist, and the client, which obviously takes time to develop.
Now, if people watching us this morning realize that a loved one is suffering with this condition, stuttering, when they source a therapist to help their loved one, they've got to make sure that the therapist has a special interest in stuttering.
Absolutely.
You can't just go to any therapist because that ain't going to work.
Yeah, it's really important. Like, obviously, I'm a speech therapist and I studied at Wits here, at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, and I learned about cleft palates, I learned about voice disorders. But if a mom phones me and says, look, my child has a cleft palate, please see him, or my child has a voice disorder, please see him, even though supposedly I'm qualified because I'm a speech therapist, I will refer to a speech therapist who has a speciality in voice or cleft, because everything is a niche. So that's why I say, when someone phones me and asks me, you know, if they live in Cape Town or Durban or wherever, I say, phone and see and ask the speech therapist if they have a special interest or if they specialize in stuttering. Overseas, there's actually an additional qualification or an extra qualification that one can get to deal with fluency. In South Africa, not. I've been, you know, I'm lucky enough to have been going overseas, and I've been a keynote speaker internationally, you know, stuttering. There's such a stuttering world out there. There's an International Fluency Association. There's an International Stuttering Association. The ISA, which is the International Stuttering Association, is an association for people who stutter internationally. They hold a conference once every 3 years. The International Fluency Association is an association for speech therapists who specialize in stuttering. They hold a conference once every 3 years as well.
And you just told me off air that the conference is happening, the African conference is happening in 2021.
Yes.
You're very excited about it.
Yes, in South Africa, which is fantastic. So that will be bringing African countries to South Africa, obviously getting keynote speakers, international keynote speakers, David Shapiro, some of the big names to come in and speak to South Africa, and obviously some African countries are very underdeveloped, to help them out. So it's really nice, and support groups are really important. Going back to Speak Easy. So
that's a support group you started.
Well, I didn't start it.
Okay.
I actually attended Speak Easy as a person who stutters when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
Then I went to university and I did speech therapy, and then I did my master's in speech therapy, and obviously specialized. I did my research on stuttering on self-help groups. And at that stage, Speak Easy has ceased to exist because you know how these groups go, they just kind of die out. And when I did my survey, some of the results were they wanted to reignite Speak Easy.
Wow.
So I took it upon myself to reignite Speak Easy. So I hold meetings maybe 4 times a year, free of charge, and it's for people who stutter to come together, to know that they're not alone, because that's one of the big things. People who stutter sometimes feel they're the only one. They're going through such emotional turmoil sometimes, can't getting the words out. So Speak Easy, speakeasy.org.za is speakeasy.org.za. That's what I'm the chairperson of, and it's just really important for people to come together, hear other people, get support.
We spoke about stuttering, and you also brought us something else which I was not aware about, and that is cluttering. So what is that all about? And as you unpack cluttering, we'll understand what it is. People with this disorder, I'm not quite sure how to refer to it, a syndrome or a disorder, can they come to you as well?
Yes.
Do you specialize in stuttering and cluttering?
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up. And cluttering, cluttering has been around for a long time, but it's just recently become more apparent in the fluency world. So you have the fluency umbrella, and under the fluency umbrella, you have stuttering and you have cluttering. So what is stuttering? Like I said before, stuttering is the disruption of the forward flow of speech, either by the repetitions or blocks. Cluttering is really, really fast paced. We don't really understand what you're doing, we kind of get the point.
Ooh.
Okay, exactly. So cluttering is a really fast pace of speech where as a result of that fast pace, maybe some syllables are dropped, some words are dropped as well, and it falls under the umbrella term of fluency disorders. So yes, a speech therapist who specializes in fluency should be able to deal with cluttering, but like I said, it's kind of been under the radar. And recently, actually, so there's now been developed an ICA, an International Cluttering Association. It's a very young association because interest has just recently developed. Absolutely.
I know one or two people who are clutterers, and I've always kind of just assumed they very excitable people. They, kind of on a high all of the time or most of the time, and that is why they speak the way they do. I'm wrong, aren't I?
Well, it's got to do with the activity. So you're saying because they're so active and they think so fast and whatever, that's why they talk so fast.
Excitable.
There are lots of different elements of cluttering, and it's not really well understood, but it as well, just like stuttering, cluttering can sometimes be very frustrating for the person who clutters. But interestingly enough, one of the main differences between stuttering and cluttering is some people who clutter don't even realize that there's an issue with their speech. Where a person who stutters, they usually feel there's, we talked about the psychological part of it, where clutterers may not even be aware that people are not understanding them. And people will say, what? Sorry, can you repeat that again? So people who clutter may be frustrated because people keep asking them to repeat, but they may not even be aware of their speech. So that's one of the major differences between stuttering and cluttering. So what a speech therapist does, and I'm not going to get into it because as you can imagine, there's so much to unpack, but the first thing is awareness. Okay, so usually with people who clutter, it may be their employers who send them to a speech therapist, or maybe a wife or a spouse, because we don't understand what you say.
And I should imagine it's very exhausting for the people around them because they're speaking at this very rapid pace and you can't even quite follow them.
Absolutely.
Or make sense of what's going on.
Yeah, and some people will say they swallow words.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all got to do with cluttering. That's, as you can hear, it's very different from stuttering. But it's interesting as well.
It's on the opposite end of the spectrum, is it not?
But sometimes there's stuttering and cluttering,
Ooh.
okay? And which you have a combination of the two. And what happens there, the cluttering may lead to stuttering.
Okay.
And you can imagine that.
How difficult is it to treat?
Well, it's
the combination.
It falls under the fluency of umbrellas. So again, if you have a motivated client, if you have a clinician who knows what he or she is doing, and if there's a good rapport, I believe anything is manageable.
We also hear, very especially grandmas used to say, oh, don't worry too much about that because he or she will outgrow stuttering or cluttering. Is there any truth in that?
Again, depending on the age. Okay, so at the beginning of the interview, we chatted about normal disfluency between 2 to 5 years old. So 85% will outgrow that. Some of them don't, and they may become people who stutter or people who clutter. My biggest red flag is if the child is aware of that, if they stop talking, if they don't want to talk, that is a red flag. You need to get that person, that child, to therapy ASAP. Because the last thing, as soon as possible, the last thing we want is that child to stop talking. Where it's really important for the grandmother, the mother, the father to focus on the content, not the manner. So even if that child is struggling, and yes, I know the mom's heart may be breaking, okay, but to keep the smile, to say, wow, that was such a lovely story, thank you for telling me, because you want to keep that child from talking. The last thing you want to do is for that child to close up, then to go in the bedroom and phone a speech therapist. So that's really important.
And I presume there have been cases where a child just closes up completely simply because it's way too stressful for the child to even attempt talking, because he or she is being teased. Believe it or not, we've come to the end of the interview. Just quickly summarize for us, and how do we get in touch with you?
Okay, so in summary, it's never too late to get help for stuttering. Any age is possible. Self-help groups are really important to attend. If you're in Johannesburg, or even if you're in South Africa, speakeasy.org.za, speakeasy.org.za, or you can email me directly. It's Dina, dina.lilian @gmail.com, dina.lilian@gmail.com. So attending speech therapy with a specialist who stutters, who has a speciality in stuttering, a self-help group, is never too late. And give people who stutter a chance to speak, because there's nothing wrong with them.
Don't speak over them.
Absolutely.
And don't complete their sentences for them.
And don't tell them to slow down.
Okay. I really have to ask you this very quickly. A stutterer, having gone for therapy with someone like yourself, and later on in life decide that they'll go for speech and drama just to help them even further, would that work?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It doesn't, and you know what, even if someone goes for speech therapy, it doesn't mean they're cured. Speech will still go up and down, but it just means they have a management tool for it. And the biggest thing for therapy when a person comes to me is empowerment, to give them the power to have a choice not to stutter, because if they don't, then they don't know what's coming out of their mouth. They're taken by surprise. So empowerment is really important.
Wonderful talking to you, and thank you for giving hope to the stutterers
Absolutely.
and clutterers of the world. And you have all of her details. Dina Lillian is her name. She is a speech therapist specializing in stuttering and cluttering, and she also told me off air that she has rooms at Donald Gordon, and what was the other?
In Norwood.
In Norwood. So easy to get hold of her. Please do give her a call if you find a loved one in the situation. Don't go away. We'll be talking Unati container clinics, and we're also going to be talking olive harvesting and hiking in the Palestine. Welcome back. I am really excited to talk about the next concept. It's Anjali Clinics. The CEO is in studio with me. Her name is Linda Toussaint, and she's here to make us, you and I, understand just how vital a role the Anjali clinics are playing in South Africa. And sad to say, it's the first time I've heard about it, but I've been blown away by the concept, and my thinking is, imagine if you have these type of clinics throughout South Africa, what a burden it will take off the state hospitals and even private clinics for that matter. So let's get talking to Linda Toussaint about the Anjali Clinic concept. Morning, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Well, I'm blown away. That's all I can say, is that I'm absolutely blown away. And good on you and a few like-minded people who got together way back in 2010.
Correct.
And decided that something needs to happen, there's something seriously wrong with the healthcare providing or the healthcare system in the country, and something needs to be done. So how did Anjali, how was it born? Where were you at in your life to want to embrace something like this?
So conceptualized back in 2010, but I think prior to that, Dr. Ian Barton, who is the founder of Anjali Clinics, as a medical doctor, often found himself in a situation where patients were coming to see him as a medical doctor, where there could be task shifting to a professional nurse level, where the patient could have been dealt with at nurse level as opposed to coming to him as a doctor. So he had always come up with this idea that there could be this nurse-led initiative in South Africa, given the shortage of doctors that we have in our country. And so back in 2010, they conceptualized the idea. At that point in time, I was still in the corporate environment, but looking for something.
As a chartered accountant.
Yes, I was running a business that was in the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay.
But I was really looking for something with more heart, and I wanted to give back to the people of South Africa. And so 2010, the idea was conceptualized, and Ian was busy with the team at that point in time. I joined the business in 2014, apologies, and that was when we created the non-profit company, which is the business that I run at this point in time, in order for us to fundraise, implement, manage the Anjali Clinic network.
And the fascinating thing about this is when we talk Anjali, we're talking about container clinics throughout the townships in South Africa. Who came up with that idea? Because I thought that was so clever.
Okay, so again, Ian, the idea around the container clinics was the original concept. Reason being, so the way that it works is we empower black women professional nurses to ultimately operate and then own a primary healthcare container clinic in the township communities. So the concept of the container is that it is not moving all the time, so it's not mobile, but it is movable. And the idea is that at the end of the 5-year period, that asset becomes the nurse's, and she's able to move the asset, should she buy land in her community, to move it onto her own land, and it is then a movable commodity. The other reason for containers is very quickly converted. So it's not just a container, it is turned into a healthcare facility. And it is also less easy to break into the clinics if they are in a container base.
And I should imagine cost-wise too, it's very feasible.
Absolutely.
With due respect to Anjali and all of the nurses and other great nurses in the country, we do know that nurses have a very bad rap in terms of, their heart and soul is not in the type of work they're doing. Are people confident enough to go to an Anjali clinic knowing that there isn't a medical doctor there, but they're going to be diagnosed and given meds by a nurse? How much of confidence do they have in that situation?
I think the patient numbers talk to the confidence. So through the network of 70 clinics, 40,000 plus patients go through our doors on a monthly basis.
70 clinics throughout the country.
Correct. So in 8 of the 9 provinces, we'll be in the Western Cape towards the back end of this year, and then we'll have a national representation.
And 70 is not nearly enough.
No.
What's a long-term plan?
So
to have how many?
So 1,000 clinics would be a bit more representative, but Ian always dreamt of 2,500 clinics. So as many community pharmacies as you have in South Africa, we could have that many clinics. And it really is, as you mentioned in the opening, it is about ensuring that all of our communities have access to some level of primary care. And the nurse, your question
to
around...
go back to that question.
Exactly. So your question around the nurse is, they are highly trained. So these are not, these are nurses that have been in primary health care for 5 to 10 years. They have been working in government clinics at the coalface. And I think the whole question around the bad rap, it may not necessarily be the nurse. I think the conditions under which many of our nurses have to operate on a daily basis, given the number of patients they need to see, the conditions of our facilities, very often not having equipment or medication, they're at the coal front in terms of the feedback from the patient. And I think that the nurses get a bad rep, but I don't think that they should be getting the full rep. They're trying what they can do. And in Anjali's case, we have taken highly qualified nurses and put them into an opportunity where they can really be the nurses that they chose or dreamt of being when they were young girls.
Are they able to manage on their own? Because what you've also told me is that they dispense meds as well. Yeah. So it's one nurse per container. Is that a feasible enough solution as far as Anjali is concerned?
So yes, that's how it starts out. And the nurses have done their dispensing course. It's a healthcare professional course for dispensing, and that's through the Pharmacy Council. So they have done the necessary course. They act within their scopes of practice of a nurse. That is very, very important. So we're not trying to replace a doctor here. We're trying to allow the patient to have access to primary care. So the nurse is almost the gatekeeper to primary care, and once it's outside of the scope of practice of a nurse, referral to a doctor. We are even in the fourth industrial revolution.
How so?
In terms of being able to, the healthcare system that we operate, the patient management system, is tablet based. The patient record is kept in the cloud.
Wow.
We're able to remotely talk to a doctor. So if you think about remote areas of Limpopo where it would probably be 60 kilometers to the closest doctor, and what you're then able to do is keep the patient in the clinic. The nurse dials up the doctor. The doctor is then able to consult with the nurse, who's the hands of the doctor. She's done her initial diagnosis, has got to a point where she goes, I think it's this, but I'm now handing over to the doctor. It's outside of my scope of practice. And the doctor can consult with the patient in the nurse's presence. So you then able to provide a much more holistic care for the patient. And the doctor can then script if needs be, but at least we're not sending the patient away. They're able to get all of their care in one place.
And are nurses tapping into that resource on a regular basis? Because we don't want them playing God and making decisions which may not necessarily be right for the patient, very especially in your remotest and most rural parts of the country.
Yeah.
What is it that you guys do to encourage them to make use of that resource?
So I think it's very, very important in terms of the enterprise development agreement that we have with the nurses. So the non-profit company has an agreement with the nurse. Under that agreement, compliance not only to regulatory but to our standard operating procedures, reporting and financial procedures is vital. So the thing that drives ownership ultimately for the nurse is compliance to all of those things. If she's non-compliant, if she breaches her enterprise development agreement in any way, breaches regulations, acts outside of her scope of practice, we can step in and replace the nurse. So the community doesn't lose the clinic, but the nurse loses the opportunity to ultimately have her own business. So compliance drives that ultimate ownership. Very important too for the nurses that they understand they are not doctors. And that is vital to the whole process. So within their scope of practice, they act and they're referring to the doctors when needed. We've seen that. In terms of the compliance that we manage, a lot of oversight. We have clinical oversight. We have a number of doctors that work with us as well in terms of being referral doctors for the nurses in their areas. And then, of course, working with the hospitals as well in our areas for the emergency cases.
You have lots of checks and balances in place, and I have no doubt in my mind that corporate governance also plays a huge role here, even though the container might be out in the most remote part of the country. But what other checks and balances do you have in place to ensure that top quality care is being given and the nurse does operate to the highest standards as set out by Unani?
So Anjali has an operations team.
Pardon, Anjali.
We have an operations team that's on the ground, and we conduct operational audits on an ongoing basis, unannounced. So the team is going in and doing an audit and ensuring that the standard operating procedures are implemented. We do financial audits. There's reporting that comes back to us on a monthly basis, and we will do financial audits to ensure that what is being reported by the business is true and actual. Social media plays a huge role in terms of our monitoring. So our patients help us with the monitoring of service as well as the services, the service that the nurse provides. So social media through Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever it may be, patients are feeding back to us if there are issues, and we're able to then go back to the nurse and understand what the problem may have been. But thankfully, we have more compliments than complaints, and we really are getting the input of our patient, which is highly
Okay,
valuable.
let's go for an ad break. When we come back, we'll talk some more about this amazing concept, Anjali Clinics. The CEO is in studio talking to us about it. Fascinating, isn't it? And I'm also wondering, how does this fit into the regular government clinics? Are they kind of almost competition to each other? Does Anjali being present in the townships give the government clinics something to really think about and up their ante as far as service provision is concerned? We'll try and unpack all of that and much more, so don't go away. Linda Toussaint is my guest. She is the CEO of the Anjali Clinics. As you've heard, we've been talking about this amazing concept, and I think more and more of such clinics are needed, and I think it will take the strain and the stress off our state hospitals. Hopefully we won't have such a long queues and frustration when you go to a state institution. Now, Linda, how does this impact, I should imagine, very positively on job creation? Is it just really about one nurse per container? Are there other kind of spin-offs that comes from something like this?
Job creation is a big part of what we do. So if you think about the impact Anjali's making through the Sustainable Development Goals, we tick Sustainable Development Goal 3, which is good health, and we just tick number 5, which is gender equality. We're empowering nurses.
Male and female.
Exactly. And then we're also ticking SDG 8, which is about decent work.
Okay.
And so what the nurses have is they are based in the community. They can't operate that clinic on their own. They always start with a clinic assistant, somebody that can greet the patient, somebody that can manage the patient file and queues. And then very often they take on another community member, be it somebody that can help cleaning the facility or securing the facility at night through a security guard. But as the clinics grow, as their businesses grow, so they take on more community members and provide jobs. So our largest clinic employs the nurse, who is the owner-operator, who takes on 3 other nurses that helps her operate her clinic, and 5 or 6 other in admin people that work with her. So you can have an opportunity where a clinic employs 10 people from the community.
Depending how busy they are and which area they are actually servicing.
Absolutely.
Now, we've talked about this amazing concept, but surely there is costs involved, because you've talked about empowering this nurse, creating job opportunities, etc. It does come with a price. It does come at a price. Is it affordable enough for the communities? Why should they opt to come to Anjali as opposed to the government clinics?
All right, so let's go back to the principle behind Anjali, and that is that we empower black women professional nurses to ultimately own their own clinic. The cost of the infrastructure, we remove that risk by having funders such as Imperial, Johnson & Johnson, AVI. Those are the funders that provide enterprise development funding to the non-profit company. We then obtain the infrastructure and the like. So the nurse has the risk of that financial investment removed. That infrastructure is paid for if she is compliant. So the cost to the patient then is reduced, because she doesn't have to repay a loan to a bank or the finance charges associated with that. So she can charge a consultation fee of 200 Rand, including medication, for primary health care within her scope of practice. And that is our general charge. We offer other services as well. So a glucose test will not cost you 200 Rand. If you're coming in for something specific, it's a little less. But if you're coming in, you're not sure what's happened, you're not feeling great, the nurse is going to examine you, diagnose and provide you with medication. 200 Rand is the charge. And the whole reason behind coming to that 200 Rand was making sure that the nurse's salary is covered, her operating expenses are covered, as well as the cost of the medication. So it's not unaffordable to the patients we're trying to attract. And you started talking about the government facilities, and it's very important for us to put out there that we are not competing with government. In fact, that what we are trying to do is assist government through capacity building. So if we're able to draw some of the patients away from government facilities that can afford to pay something towards their healthcare, that frees up those nurses in the government facilities to deal with the unemployed and the destitute that are unable to afford. So if you think about our population, 58 million people, and it grows daily, 10 million of us are, I suppose, have the ability to be on private medical aid. There's another 10 to 12 million people that are the employed, uninsured market. That's Anjali's market.
Ah.
That's who we focus on. People that have the ability to access some level of finance. And if we can draw those 10 to 12 million people away from the government facilities, we're starting to make an impact in terms of capacity building.
Hopefully, long-term plans, is this going to be perhaps something that might address the NHI, which frightens the hell out of all of us? Do you think this could be workable if enough containers are out in throughout South Africa?
I think Anjali definitely has a role to play in NHI. I don't think it's the silver bullet. I do think it can work along doctors' practices, hospital groups, other clinics, as well as the government facilities. We all have to step in order for NHI to be a successful program. And so for me, yes, I think there are a lot of questions that still need to be asked or answered. But at the end of the day, that's how we want to position ourselves as a service provider to NHI and help play a role in providing care to our people.
We've almost come to wrap-up time. Let's talk very quickly about your short and long-term goals and challenges in having started Anjali up.
So I guess funding is always the main challenge, but we have had fantastic donors coming forward through enterprise development and our BBBE codes. But over and above that, we've had National Treasury come to the party through the Jobs Fund. And so we have made application to the Jobs Fund, and as a result of us creating jobs, we also have the support of government in terms of implementing this initiative. Finding nurses has not necessarily been the issue. We put them through a very stringent selection process because not everybody can be an entrepreneur, and that's what we're looking for here. And a good nurses as well. Absolutely, focusing on what their strengths are. And we as the non-profit company provide them with all of the affiliatory support in terms of running their businesses, how they should do that, how they should report. And then I think sites, where we actually place our containers, where we put those clinics. And a lot of research is done around determining community need and ensuring that we place a container where there is a need, but also there's ability to afford. Apart from getting as many containers, Anjali containers, out into the communities where it is needed most, what about offering additional services? I'm thinking dentists, opticians, physiotherapists, psychologists, etc., etc., etc. Yes, absolutely. So again, I believe that primary healthcare is something that needs to be in communities at all times. It's not something that can be mobile and delivered on an ad hoc basis. Dentistry is another element we could bring into Anjali clinics, but I don't think it has to be a fixed service. It could be something that we reached out to dentist technicians who then would come on an appointment basis and visit an Anjali clinic. Same with an optician. You could do it on an appointment basis and bring them in on a particular day. So that's a mobile service we could add on to what Anjali is currently offering to the communities. And there's a very special reason why you're here today. Tell us about the fact that you've reached a very important milestone. So this year has been an amazing year in terms of milestones. One, we've celebrated the 1,000,000th patient engagement since our inception, which has been fantastic. Thank you very, very much. And then two, we have 4 nurses graduating from the Enterprise Development Program and taking ownership of their clinics. So, we started out 5 years ago and some of our nurses thought, oh, is this a scam? We don't know if this is too good to be true. Right. And they are graduating this year with ownership of their clinics. Ongoing congratulations. That's where we leave it. Thank you indeed for coming in and sharing this amazing story with us. So you see, there is hope for this amazing Rainbow Nation. People believe in us as a nation, and anything and everything is possible. We just need to apply our minds. Don't go away. We're going to be talking olive harvesting and hiking in the Palestine. And I'm really pleased to have the final guest on the show this morning, Muniba Bayat, no stranger to ITV. She's been here previously to talk about a whole host of things. She's here once again to talk about Nature Lovers South Africa, and particularly olive harvesting and hiking in the Palestine. She was here last year talking about olive harvesting,
another fascinating concept. We're going to touch on it because she's just come back from that trip, and then also talk about this other aspect that she's added to the trip, and that is hiking in the Palestine. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you, Julie, for having me on your program once again.
Great to have you here. And it all started way back with Nature Lovers South Africa.
Correct.
Tell us how it started.
All right, so Nature Lovers South Africa started 4 years ago. It was myself and a friend, Majid Amir, over dinner. You know, we just spoke about what weuld like to do.
By the way, I know her too.
Yes.
She's a friend.
I know.
A mutual friend.
Exactly, yeah. So it was really over dinner, and, you know, we just spoke about what we feel is the need in our communities. I've been hiking for a couple of years, and she's been hiking, and she said, well, I hike every weekend, and why don't we start hiking together? And I said, that's great. And then I just shared my idea of the fact that I'm doing lots of empowerment work with women that are single, people that are afraid to go out in the mornings, early mornings, and what my plan is in terms of doing something like this to include others. And she said, that's great, so let's start off together. So we both just invited a friend each, and we were 4 of us on our first hike. And that's where Nature Lovers actually started off from. So we walked our first hike in Sekabos. And then from there, these friends went and invited 2 friends, and we invited more friends.
And it just grew and grew and grew.
And we created a social media page, which is called Nature Lovers SA. And I think from there, we've had lots of positive feedback. Lots of people came on board and said, oh, we didn't know that, you know, you could hike in reserves around Johannesburg. We just thought it was too dangerous. So that's how it started off. And it's been an amazing journey. So we've had lots of, initially it was a lot of single women that started joining us. And then there were women that felt their husbands had their own lives on a Sunday morning. So they joined us. And then they asked, could their husbands join us? So it's now not just a women's only club, but it's become a nice big group of all ages, different diversities of culture, religions, you know. So it's really been an amazing journey. It's very therapeutic for all of us because we have such hectic lifestyles. So I think having the Sunday morning where we hike every Sunday makes a huge difference to people's lives.
Would I be correct in also thinking that from this Nature Lovers South Africa, you've had a couple of people climb Mount Kili and Mount Everest?
Correct, that's right.
And
yes.
it all started with Nature Lovers South
Correct,
Africa.
yes, yeah.
My
I think
word.
it was just such a nice a group of people that joined up, and we've had, you know, like in our hiking group, we had 2 ladies that had already done Kilimanjaro, and then, you know, they just showed interest that they'd love to do Everest, and then I've always wanted to do Kilimanjaro or one of the 7 summits. And what happened was I found out about a group of men that used to go hiking, which is like Kili and Everest Base Camp 1, and I just called him. His name is Baki Kavadia, and I said, Mohammed, you know, we've got women that want to climb, but they don't want to go alone, and whenever we've called the agents, there's always like sort of a whole group of non-Muslim people that we have to join. And he said, okay, well, let me think about it, because I've never taken women along with. But I don't mind giving it a shot, and my daughters are very keen to join me. So I booked Mount Elbrus with him.
Wow,
and
that's
then,
Russia.
That's Russia. And then I kind of sent his post out to our nature lovers and said, there's a group going to Everest Base Camp 1 who's interested. Please contact Baki Kavadia directly. And that's how it started off. And then they contacted him, and he took 3 of our hikers with him. And they thoroughly enjoyed the trip. It was amazing. They did theirs in March. Ours was booked for June. And that's how we then joined Baki. So going forward, that's what we'll do. So our Nature Lovers basically does your weekend hikes, which is every Sunday we hike. And then on a weekend, once every 2 months, we do a weekend away. And then we would do like the Berg or Magaliesberg, somewhere where you stay over and you do a much more sort of intense hike. It's also part of the coaching and the training for those that want to do bigger hikes and mountain climbing, you know.
Brilliant.
That's really
How
nice.
do people join the group?
Okay, so well, basically what happens is I share my WhatsApp number on my Facebook page, and we've got a Facebook page, and I've got an Instagram page as well. So people can just message and contact us and say, look, we'd like to know more about it. And then I send them the information, you know, via WhatsApp. And there's a membership fee that we charge, which is 120 rands for the year. And that's not taking into the club. What we do with that 120 rands is we actually host an orphanage, and we take children from the orphanage to hike with us on a 3-monthly basis. And basically what we're looking at there is picking up young kids that have got this shared interest, and we'd like to pursue that and make them, you know, one day climb mountains if they want to do that and be able to fund that. So it's very easy. They just contact me and then I send them all the details and then we sign them up as members.
Very appealing, and very especially for people who are wanting to start getting fit and, you know, add some meaning to their lives, very especially on the weekends. They may be concerned about their fitness level, because you're talking about hikes away in the Machalis and Sacred Bos, etc. And people wanting to join you may just feel, I'm not at that fitness level to be joining this club.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no, that's a very good question. So what we've actually done is we have a beginner's day. So that's when people just start hiking with us. So we would do a very easy 4K hike. So we choose our hikes around Johannesburg that are going to be, you know, sort of good for them, friendly for them to be able to hike. And then what we do is once they're comfortable doing their 4, we kind of increase the space to 6 or 8. We have a lot of hikers that just come as a social and they just want to do 4 or 5, and that's fine, you know. So they come, and what's lovely about the way our hiking group is kind of evolved is that because we're so many numbers, you know, now we're like almost about 90 members. So on an average on a Sunday, we're between 20 and 25, 30 people. What we can do is we can split the groups. So what we do is then we'll have somebody do the beginners,
hikers,
exactly,
okay.
and then we'd have the more serious hikers do their 16 because they come and really do a good workout. And then we've got those that want to do a bigger climb, that want to climb with backpacks and all of that. And we also kind of educate people when they start up with us, you know, the right kind of walking shoes, the right bags that they've got to carry, water, you know, all the necessary stuff for making sure that they're safe on the hikes. And that's basically what we do. And we've had every week we have new members joining us all the time. So our calendar of the month would then have a beginner's class, an intermediate, and then a beginner's hike, an intermediate hike, and then obviously a more advanced hike for 2 weekends of the month. Yeah.
Sounds absolutely fascinating.
Yeah,
and you are saying it's growing by numbers.
Oh, it is, yeah.
And may you grow stronger with each passing week.
Inshallah.
I must give it some serious thinking.
Yes.
Let's go for an ad break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Palestine, your passion, and how Nature Lovers South Africa has propelled you into this amazing area. Muniba Bayat is my guest. We're now going to be talking about olive picking and hiking in the Palestine. Don't go. Muniba Payat is my guest. We're going to now talk olive harvesting and backpacking or hiking in the Palestine. Now, I know we spoke about this last year. This is your second trip to the Palestine. You've gone olive harvesting again with a group of 16 people, and then you also went backpacking. How different, being the second time, how different was the trip this time around?
Okay, so just to correct you, it's actually my third time in 1 year.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I went for Ramadan as well. But
what did you do then, Ramadan?
Just for myself. I did Nafil Itikaf for 10 days.
Alhamdulillah. So just to go and spend Ramadan there.
Just Ramadan, 10 days. It was absolutely beautiful.
We're focusing on the backpacking and the olive harvesting.
Yes, that's right. So, okay, the harvesting started last year when we did the interview, and I was invited to come and take friends over. So because we were so overwhelmed and scared about what we were going to get when we went across there, I only took 2 of my friends with, and we had an amazing trip. So what we did is we harvested for 5 days, and then we went across to Jordan and we hiked in Jordan.
That was last year.
Last year. And the harvesting is basically what I'm going to be doing annually from now onwards.
All right. What was the reason for crossing over into Jordan and hiking there? Did it have anything to do with safety issues?
Well, because because we weren't aware that we could hike in Palestine.
Okay.
You know, so obviously we get all the doom and gloom information here in South Africa. So when we planned our trip to Palestine, we didn't think that there were hiking trails in Palestine that we could actually do.
And there are.
And there are beautiful hiking trails in the West Bank, and then obviously in occupied Palestine, which is what we call Israel. So I didn't know about that, but obviously, speaking to Farid, our friend that we olive harvested with, he said to me, why are you hiking in Jordan? You should have hiked in Palestine. So that's when I got a lot of the information, and I thought, okay, when I go back, I'll definitely do my homework and I'll come back and, hike in Palestine. So the harvesting is something that we're going to promote every single year. It's an amazing opportunity for people to come, to actually get to, enjoy what they offer.
And obviously to help the Palestinian people
Correct.
harvest their crop before it is spoilt.
Correct. And also their harvest season is only for a month. And then we do know what happens with obviously the occupation. So that's one of the reasons. It's also about getting people to go and see a different side of Palestine and not just Aqsa and maybe Hebron. That's what generally what people do is they go with a tour agent and those are the two places that they see, and they go for a bus ride to Ramallah and they back on the flight and then they go on to Makkah and Medina. So it's for me it was about educating people that you can actually go to Palestine and spend a 2-week holiday. And if you're spending money going all over the world, why not spend it in Palestine? Support the economy, support the people, go and get to know them. They're the most amazing, hospitable people you will ever meet, So it was really stunning. So, from the harvesting, because Fareed then said to me, don't ever go back and hike in Jordan. I'm not saying don't, but if you want to rather hike in Palestine, we'd love to host you and hike in Palestine. So it started off like that. And, I always say when you put something out there in the universe, Allah gives it to you.
Absolutely.
So again, my Elbrus hike in Russia, here we hiking and we meet this 20 Palestinians hiking on Mount Elbrus as well. And all young, all ages, men and females. And it was so lovely to meet them on the mountains. And I then said, so I was introduced to them and I said, I'm coming to Palestine again to do olive harvesting. And I actually want to do hiking in Palestine. So immediately the group said, oh Maya, that's so exciting. We'd love to have you there. Please bring as many people as you can and come and hike and tell us when you're coming. We'll organize a hike. So it's, it all kind of happened in the mountains. And then I kept all the contact details and I messaged. And when I came back and said, it was so wonderful to meet all of you. So we met 1 or 2 times after that every day because you're hiking the same route every day. So we met them a few times and we shared numbers and that's how it started. So when I came back from Russia, I made contact with the girls and said, listen, I'm going to come down. I'm bringing people to Olive Harvest and these are my dates that we're going to be there. So they created a group and put all their hikers on the group and said, all right, this is our dates that we're available. When is it good for you? So I kind of had to work out the whole group trip that I had because I took 16 people to harvest.
But not all 16 were backpacking.
No, and not all 16 wanted to hike. And also they all came in at different times. So I was there for 21 days. So what I did is basically the first group was there and they harvested and they didn't want to hike. And then second and third group as well. The third group, there was a couple that said they would hike and then they changed their mind, which was fine. So I went ahead and still did the hike.
So let's talk about the olive harvesting as compared with last year when you spoke to us about this amazing experience.
Yes.
Because it was the second time you were doing that again with groups of people. How different was it? And are you still hooked to it? And is this something you're going to do for the rest of your life, inshallah?
Oh, no, it was actually better.
Why?
I think sharing the experience with others and having 16 people have the same enjoyment that I had and to have that whole opportunity of meeting the families and staying in the village.
And living like the locals.
Exactly. And harvesting was hard work, but they amazed me. I mean, each group was different dynamics of personalities, different ages, but it was really stunning. And the couple were the youngest out of the group that was there. And I think that's what we want to encourage, more people joining, more younger people coming and joining us on these opportunities so that they can also have the same enjoyment that we have. And it opens up a whole new world to you, in different lights. You meet different people from different parts of the world because there's people from all over the world.
It just opens your mind and your perspective on life.
Exactly.
But that being said, Muniba, obviously, when people talk about holidays and experiences, we normally talk about the beauty and all the highlights. There must have been challenges. What were they and how did you overcome them?
So for me, there were no challenges, and also backpacking across and traveling across checkpoints and all of that. Yes, you have, the soldiers stop you and say where you're going to and why you're going, look through your passport and all of that. But there were no real challenges as such.
And you need to accept that as part of your trip.
Exactly.
Just be prepared for it because you're going to be harassed at the border posts.
Exactly, absolutely. And
or the checkpoints.
The checkpoints or whatever else you're going to be going through. But other than that, I wasn't harassed. I was and I met the most amazing people, because everywhere there was a contact to meet and a person that was ready to welcome me and host me and take me around. So it was really a wonderful journey, you know. And also then going back to the hiking, as in so what I did is during my harvesting period, I had breaks in between, and that's when I toured and traveled. So the 1 week I went up to Golan Heights, which is in Syria, with a friend, and we did a bit of hiking there. And then I came back from there, harvested again for a couple of days, and then I went and met the group from Jerusalem that then did the whole weekend hike with me. That was an overnight hike. It was so beautiful. They basically set up this whole camp. We did a traditional Palestinian dish over the fire. We slept over the night. I've never felt so safe in my life.
And this is exactly, you know, you really preempted my next question. And I guess this is what you see all around the world, sensationalism. Even in South Africa, when there are trouble spots, people elsewhere in the world seem to think South Africa is on fire.
Correct.
Just put the issue into perspective for us, because I mentioned when I read one of your WhatsApp messages that you're going to hike and going for olive harvesting again. Yes. I mentioned it to young people in my family, and they kind of looked at me as if I was mad. Very especially when I expressed that maybe next year I'm going to be joining her as well. Because you think of doom and gloom, you think of these checkpoints, you think about the Israeli soldiers, you think about how they're going to make your life as miserable as possible.
Correct.
You also think worst case scenario where on some crazy notion of theirs you're going to land up in jail.
Yes.
And the key gets thrown away.
Correct, yeah. I think, you know, that's also being safe, you know, so also not being in areas where there is turmoil. And also generally what happens is the Palestinians will tell you, don't be in this area because this is what's happening. But, you know, my whole experience has been so different from other people, because I'm quite a risk taker. So I explored and I wanted to know, how is it that people travel? And it's a completely different experience from what I've heard. So I've traveled, I've seen the most beautiful places. I've been
in Palestine.
In Palestine, in the West Bank. Okay, so I've traveled in the West Bank. There are about 6 beautiful hikes that you can do in West Bank,
and you
very
can travel,
safe. And very safe. You can also visit the different cities in the West Bank, which are beautiful cities. They have a lot of history to share. You can spend almost a day or 2 days in each city, and you still wouldn't see enough of that. And then I crossed over into obviously occupied Palestine, and then that's where we hiked in the in an area called the Bazit area, and waterfalls all from the Jordanian mountains. So
wow.
It was a beautiful. If I do a comparison, it's like your garden route. So, you know, the areas
wow.
that we go, and that's where we hike, and that's where Drakensberg, your mountains, all of that. So that's exactly what I experienced of Palestine. And that's what I wanted to share with people, and I want people to know, is that there is so much you can actually do when you're there and spending time there in Palestine.
So there are pockets of people that lead a regular life, so to speak.
Millions live a regular life. So if you actually go there, and that's what's so admirable about the Palestinians, is that despite the occupation and the oppression, they all have moved forward. They have, under all that, you know, atrocities, they live life. They don't have the luxuries like we do. They're very restricted in many ways. So, you know, you see it and you can understand it. But they continue pursuing to have a life of dignity. And that's what you've got to actually go in and appreciate about the people and join them on those things. So hiking has also now become a new thing where they're encouraging their women, their men to hike the fields, to hike the mountains. Because again, if you go there, you can understand that the occupation has been trying to obviously take over land. That's basically their idea. So that's why they have settlers in the West Bank, and they have confined people that live in Jerusalem, and they demolish their homes and all of that. So they're trying to take over as much as they can, or make the Palestinians' lives as miserable as possible so that they leave. And the Palestinians are saying, no, we're here to stay. We will not leave. So we are going to start taking ownership of the things that belong to us. So hiking, running, walking, whatever it is that they're doing, sport, because over the years, people were told that they just had to fight to keep the land together. And now they're saying we're here to stay and we're going to enjoy what's there to offer. And it's beautiful that they are actually doing that and starting to take ownership of doing all these beautiful things. And they also have children, they have families, they have lives like me and you, and they do stunning things in that confined space with their children to keep the unity, the happiness, to keep the hope going, because if they don't do that, their children will lose hope.
Absolutely. And during your recent trip, there was no encounters with the Israelis at all, the Israeli police at checkpoints or any such place?
No.
Even on your hikes, were you relatively safe?
Yeah.
Did you know that you're not going to be interfered with at all?
Look, you go there thinking something may happen at some point or the other, but no, nothing at all. I felt pretty safe everywhere that I traveled. And on the hikes, we were actually 8 of us that hiked with a little 10-year-old boy, Mohammed. And obviously we stayed overnight. We never felt unsafe. There was an Israeli family camped right next to us. You know, they just don't communicate with each other. This one does what they're doing and they do what they have to do. And the next morning, you know, we got up, read our fajr, all of that. He got up and did his prayers and whatever he was doing for his family, breakfast and whatever. And nobody interferes with each other. And then when we went on the hike, we obviously encountered quite a few of the Israeli Jews.
So the hiking trails are not segregated, is that what you're saying to me?
No, it's not segregated, but it's obviously, it's taken over by Israel, all right? So, but they were all Arab names before, and now they've changed them into all different names. So if you knew about the kind of reserve or the hike that was there, was probably 20, 30, I mean, many years ago, it had an Arab valley name, and now it's obviously got a Jewish name. So we kind of walked in all of those trails. You meet a lot of them. And I think most people that were on those hikes were actually just doing their own stuff, and we were doing our own things. And again, like we've had in South Africa, you know, where you kind of, sadly, apartheid is very apparent there as well. So you would stay where the Palestinians are, and you'd all be swimming in the pond and whatever else you're wanting to do. You'd be sitting and picnicking there. And if it's an Israeli, he'll be on his own with his own family's business. So
unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Thank you indeed for sharing that with us. My one concern very quickly is, do you think that there might be a point in time where they might stop Palestinians from using the hiking trails?
I don't think they can, and they won't. Even if
because
it's an open public area, and I mean, again, we've got the world watching what's going on there. So I don't think they would. Obviously, people that can hike in those areas are in the Israeli part of Palestine are Palestinians that come from Section 48, but the Palestinians from the West Bank cannot go to those areas.
That's where we have to leave it, unfortunately. That was Muni Babai talking about olive harvesting and hiking in the Palestine. Come to the end of the show. Thank you indeed for your company. As always, I'd like to remind you, take care on the roads. Silly season is around the corner. And of course, that means people are going to be behaving very stupidly on our roads. So take care. A big thank you to the production team. And as always, it is Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Alli.